They dragged her out of the cockpit, called her a disgrace, and told her she'd never touch an F-22 again. But hours later, the world watched in disbelief as that same simple woman climbed back into the sky and outflew 15 enemy fighters that no pilot alive thought could be beaten. What happened next rewrote air combat history, and the twist at the end? It will leave you speechless. This is the untold story of Kara Steele, the pilot they tried to erase. Welcome to A Simple Woman. Hit subscribe, smash the bell, and drop a 1 foot in the comments if you're ready, because you're about to witness the impossible. They dragged her from the cockpit like a criminal. Kara Steele's boots scraped the tarmac as the military police clamped down on her arms, their grips iron and unrelenting. Moments before, her hands had rested on the throttle of an F-22 Raptor, the jet she had mastered. Through thousands of flight hours, the jet that had become as much a part of her as her own breath. Now, she was nothing more than a spectacle for the entire squadron to mock. The afternoon sun burned down on the flight line, its glare cutting into her eyes, but she refused to blink. She refused to bow her head, because if they saw weakness now, the word they had branded her with would never wash away. Coward! Colonel Marcus Vane strode across the concrete with a voice that carried like a whip. "This is what failure looks like," he barked, his tone laced with disdain. An officer who disobeys orders, who believes she knows better than the chain of command. Look at her, cadets. Remember this face. It is not bravery. It is disgrace. Around him, rows of cadets stood in their flight suits, eyes flicking nervously but some unable to resist smirking. They had heard the stories. Kara Steele, the hotshot pilot who questioned everything. To them, she was no longer a legend in the making, but a warning carved in flesh and fabric. Captain Jace Rowan, polished and self-satisfied, circled just behind the colonel. He leaned in with a smile that belonged to a predator about to feed. She hesitated when it mattered, he said loud enough for everyone to hear. "Tell me, cadets, is hesitation the mark of a warrior?" The laughter that followed was sharp and cruel, the kind that tried to mask fear. Kara's jaw clenched. She hadn't hesitated out of fear. Never. She had refused to carry out a reckless dive over civilian terrain, an exercise designed only to feed Rowan's ego, an order more about showmanship than training. She knew the difference between courage and stupidity, but no one here wanted the nuance. They wanted blood. Vane stopped in front of her, his shadow falling over her like a wall. His hand shot forward, tearing the insignia from her chest with a brutal rip. The fabric burned against her skin as the emblem fell into the dust. He dropped it under his polished boot, grinding it into the tarmac as if he could erase her name from existence. The silence that followed was heavier than the heat shimmering off the runway. Then came the whispers, the snickers, the smirks passed like currency among cadets desperate not to become her. Kara bent slowly, every muscle trembling, not from defeat but from restraint. She picked up the torn insignia, brushing grit from its surface with fingers that shook. The laughter grew louder, Rowan's grin sharper. "Careful with that, coward," he sneered. "Might be the last honor you ever hold." They pulled her away, MPs gripping tighter as though she might somehow break free and ignite the jet herself. The turbines roared above, Raptors leaping into the sky that should have been hers. As the canopy of one F-22 flashed in the sunlight, Kara twisted her head, catching the gleam. It was her jet, her machine, the one she knew like her own heartbeat. Now it belonged to silence. The cadets filed back, their laughter still hanging in the air. Vane's voice cut through again, striking the crowd with the force of finality. Let this be the end of her story. Discipline will always triumph over arrogance. We do not honor hesitation, we bury it. Kara's chest burned as the MPs shoved her toward the barracks, but she never let her eyes fall. She wanted them to see the steel there, the fire that humiliation could not kill. They could drag her from the cockpit, strip her of wings, mock her before the entire base. But deep inside, something was already shifting, a seed planted not in defeat, but in defiance. As the door slammed behind her, the lock snapping shut, the echo carried with it every laugh, every sneer, every cruel glance. And yet, in that darkness, Kara Steele whispered to herself words no one else could hear. You can ground me, you can strip me, but you will not stop me. The barracks door slammed shut with a metallic thud that echoed in Kara Steele's chest. The room was small, suffocating. Its only furniture, a steel chair bolted to the floor and a desk scarred with years of neglect. The walls sweated heat from the day outside, but the air inside was colder, emptier, a cage built not of steel but of silence. She sat down heavily, the torn insignia still clenched in her fist, the grit scratching against her palm like a wound she refused to let heal. Minutes bled into an hour, maybe more. Her ears rang with the phantom roar of turbines she could no longer touch. Every vibration of the base seemed to mock her, a reminder of the life she had been ripped from. And then it came, the crackle of the radio. She froze. The device sat at the far edge of the desk, its wires frayed, its casing dented as though abandoned. She wasn't supposed to hear it, wasn't supposed to touch it, but the static that spilled from its speaker carried with it the pulse of the sky. She leaned forward, her breath shallow. Voices cut through the static, tense and clipped. Enemy aircraft confirmed, multiple bogies inbound, 15+ signatures. Another voice broke in, strained and ragged. That's not possible. 15? Where the hell did they come from? Kara's stomach knotted. 15 enemy fighters, no training exercise, no bluff. This was real. She could almost see it without needing the radar. Jets slicing through the night. Contrails burning across the horizon, their formation tight, disciplined. Whoever they were coming fast. The radio exploded with overlapping chatter. All Raptors scramble. Eagle Squadron, form up at Grid 6. The roar of engines bled through the transmission, followed by the panicked scream of a pilot. I'm locked! I can't break it. Missile inbound. The voice cut short, replaced by static and the hollow silence Kara knew too well. A life extinguished mid-air. Her hands dug into the desk until her knuckles whitened. She had been there before, heard that final scream too many times. Every instinct in her screamed to be out there, to be in her jet where she belonged. Instead, she was trapped, forced to listen as her squadron, her brothers and sisters in the sky, were torn apart. Another voice blared, sharp with command but thin with panic. Hold formation, don't scatter, damn it, stay tight! It was Jace Rowan. Kara's jaw clenched. The same man who mocked her on the flight line was now leading them into disaster. His arrogance had no answer for overwhelming numbers, no answer for precision steel. The comms fractured into chaos. They're everywhere. Break, break, break. I've got one on my 6, I can't shake him. Another scream. Another cut to silence. Kara slammed her fist into the desk, the radio rattling under the blow. Every muscle in her body trembled with rage. She pressed her forehead against the cold wall, forcing herself to breathe. The insignia in her hand bit into her skin, sharp as a blade. She thought of the cadets laughing, the colonel's voice calling her a disgrace, the way Rowan sneered when he called her a coward. And yet, Out there, those same voices were choking on fear, calling for help no one could give. Her pulse drummed louder than the sirens that began to wail across the base. Red lights strobed outside the barred window, shadows of soldiers sprinting across the tarmac. Mechanics shouted, fuel trucks roared, the earth itself seemed to shudder with the advance of enemy engines. She could feel it under her boots, the distant rumble of an approaching storm of steel. Another burst from the radio. They're pushing through Sector 9. We're losing ground fast. A younger voice, barely holding together. Where's support? We can't hold them off! Kara's throat tightened. She could see it in her mind's eye. 15 enemy jets carving through the sky like blades, Raptors falling one by one, the ground forces below bracing for slaughter. And her, locked in a room with nothing but a broken chair and a useless patch of cloth. She stood abruptly, pacing, her boots striking the floor in rhythm with the chaos outside. She couldn't sit here, not while the sky burned, not while lives were being erased one by one. They could call her reckless, they could call her defiant, but they would never call her absent. Her eyes darted around the room, the desk, the chair, crates shoved into the corner, and then she saw it. A crowbar leaning against the wall, its surface smeared with grease, forgotten by some mechanic. Her pulse quickened. She grabbed it with both hands, the weight solid, real. She raised it high and drove it against the lock. The clang rang out, but the lock held. She hit it again. Sparks spat, her arms shaking. She struck a third time, harder, until her breath came in ragged gasps. Outside, the alarm screamed louder. Boots thundered past and jets clawed into the night. No one came for her. No one even thought of her. She was invisible, and invisibility was her weapon. One more strike. The lock shrieked, bent, then snapped with a metallic cry. The door swung open. Kara staggered into the night air, chest heaving, sweat dripping down her temples. Heat, smoke, the stench of burning fuel slammed into her senses. MPs sprinted in the opposite direction, rifles clutched, eyes wide with panic. None looked her way. She was free, and somewhere on that runway, waiting under floodlights and chaos, was her chance to take back the sky. The night hit Kara Steele like a furnace of chaos. Floodlights swept across the flight line, slicing through a storm of smoke and frantic motion. Mechanics sprinted with glow wands, their shouts drowned by the roar of turbines. Fuel trucks screeched past, soldiers shouted over each other, and overhead, Raptors clawed skyward only to be met with streaks of hostile missile fire. The earth shook beneath her boots, every vibration a reminder that the storm was already here. She kept low, hugging the shadows of a maintenance truck, the crowbar still clutched in her hand. Around her, MPs rushed toward the perimeter, rifles swinging wildly. None of them looked back. They weren't searching for her. They were too busy running from the disaster unfolding above. That invisibility was her cover. Her eyes scanned the flight line, heart pounding. Jets were already airborne, trails of fire streaking into the black sky. Others lay twisted in burning wreckage, their fuselages glowing like tombs. And then she saw it. One Raptor, parked alone at the edge of the runway, canopy open, its cockpit lit in amber glow from the emergency floods. Its twin engines sat dormant, silent but waiting. The paint along its nose bore the call sign she knew as intimately as her own breath. Jace Rowan's jet. The man who had sneered at her humiliation hours ago had already gone down in flames. His machine remained, abandoned but alive, waiting for a pilot who hadn't lost her nerve. Kara's pulse hammered in her throat. That was her way back into the sky. That was salvation. She darted forward, weaving between crates and coiled fuel hoses. A jeep tore across her path, headlights blinding, soldiers shouting at each other as they sped toward the far perimeter. Kara dropped low, pressing herself flat until the vehicle vanished. Smoke burned her lungs, sweat ran down her temples, but she pushed harder. Every second lost meant another jet erased, another comrade silenced forever. As she reached the ladder of the F-22, voices blared across the loudspeakers. Colonel Marcus Vane's voice, hard and vicious, filled the base like thunder. "Lock down all aircraft! Steele is compromised. If she's seen anywhere near the line, detain her immediately." She froze, one hand gripping the ladder, the other clutching the insignia in her pocket. The order wasn't surprising. Vane would rather watch the sky fall than admit the woman he branded a coward might be the only one who could save them. She glanced around, searching for MPs, but in the chaos, none were looking her way. They were too busy chasing shadows, too busy panicking at the fire already ripping through the sky. Kara pulled herself up the ladder, each rung a heartbeat pounding in her ears. The cockpit loomed above, canopy open like the waiting mouth of destiny. She slid inside, breath catching as her body melted into the seat that had been hers for so long. The familiar scent of oil and ozone wrapped around her. Her hands moved without hesitation, flicking switches, powering systems. The jet hummed beneath her touch, panels lighting one by one as though welcoming her home. The radio came alive instantly, Vane's voice erupting. "Steele, shut that bird down immediately! That's an order!" Her fingers tightened around the throttle. For hours they had silenced her, mocked her, dragged her name into the dirt. Now those same voices filled the comms with panic. With pleas she had no time to answer. She didn't respond. Not to him, not anymore. Outside, a pair of MPs finally spotted her. They broke into a sprint, waving their arms frantically, shouting for her to stop. A jeep swerved onto the taxiway, headlights stabbing through smoke, trying to cut her off. Kara slammed the canopy shut. The hiss sealed her inside. The world beyond muted. She pushed the throttle forward. The engines roared awake, turbines shrieking into life, the entire frame trembling like a beast unchained. The MPs froze as the exhaust blasted past them, the sheer force knocking them back. The jeep barreled onto the runway, soldiers shouting, but Kara didn't flinch. She shoved the throttle forward harder. The Raptor lunged forward, wheels screeching against the tarmac. The jeep veered desperately, trying to block her path, but she kept coming. At the last second, the driver swerved away, the vehicle spinning into the smoke as the jet thundered down the line. Vane's voice exploded again. "Steele, you are disobeying direct orders. You'll be court-martialed for this." She pulled back on the stick. The nose lifted, gravity clinging to her bones, then broke free. The Raptor clawed into the night, engines howling, fire streaking from its tail. For a heartbeat, Kara felt weightless. Then the battlefield opened before her eyes. The horizon burned. Trails of fire crisscrossed the sky as Raptors tangled with enemy fighters, the numbers already lopsided. Below, columns of headlights glowed on the ground, enemy armor pushing. Forward, artillery shells painting the earth in thunderous bursts. The comms were a chorus of chaos. Pilots screaming, static cutting them off mid-sentence, one by one disappearing into silence. Kara steadied her breathing, hands firm on the stick. This was why she flew. Not for medals, not for pride, for this moment when the sky demanded someone who wouldn't turn away. Her voice cut through the comms, low but steady. "This is Steele. I'm in the fight." The silence that followed was heavy, stunned. And then came a whisper from one of the surviving cadets, barely audible over the static. "She's back!" Kara angled the nose downward, eyes locked on the cluster of enemy fighters circling like vultures. 15 predators, confident the kill was theirs. She pulled her mask tight, the hum of the Raptor sinking with her heartbeat. They had dragged her from the cockpit in shame, but now she was back where she belonged, high above the fire, with destiny in her grip. The Raptor cut through the night like a blade of silver fire. Kara Steele's breath steadied as her hands found their rhythm, left on the throttle, right on the stick. Every movement precise, instinctive, the way a pianist moves through a piece written into muscle memory. Her HUD lit up with a constellation of hostile signatures, 15 enemy fighters locked. In formation, their afterburners glowing hot white as they carved across the horizon. They were sleek, deadly machines, faster than anything her cadets had ever faced, flown by pilots who believed they already owned the sky. The comms were chaos. Eagle 6 down, ejecting, "Damn it, I'm hit!" Static swallowed the voice, then nothing. Another cut in, desperate. "There's too many of them! They're pushing us out of the sky!" Kara flicked her comms to transmit. "Stay calm, stay tight, follow the terrain, don't fight their fight." Her voice was calm, steady, in sharp contrast to the panic. For a beat, no one replied. Then one cadet whispered, as though speaking a ghost's name, "That's Steele!" The others went silent, their breathing filling the channel. She was the pilot they had laughed at, dragged off the line, branded a coward. And now she was in the fight, her Raptor glowing against the burning horizon. The enemy squadron peeled off in unison, their formations splitting like a predator's pack encircling prey. 3 came at her from head-on, missile locks shrieking in her ears. Kara didn't flinch. She shoved the throttle forward, the Raptor roaring into full afterburner, and dove straight at them. "Fox 3!" One of the enemy pilots barked in clipped tones. The missile warning lit her cockpit red and urgent. She rolled hard left, diving low across the treetops, the missile streaking past and detonating in a fireball behind her. Leaves and branches whipped across her canopy, the ground scraping so close her altimeter screamed. At the last second, she pulled hard, the Raptor knifing upward into the sky. The 3 enemy jets overshot, too fast to follow. Kara's thumb hit the weapons release. Her own missile streaked out, locking onto the leader of the trio. He juked left too late. The warhead detonated beneath his wing, the jet spiraling in fire. "Splash 1. Kara muttered, her voice calm but her pulse roaring. The second enemy banked into her 6. She felt the lock before the warning even blared. She yanked the stick back, throwing the Raptor into a violent climb, flipping it belly up in a half-cobra maneuver. The enemy pilot overshot beneath her, too aggressive, too confident. Kara rolled behind him, squeezed the trigger. Her cannon roared, 20mm shells shredding his tail. Fire erupted from the fuselage. Splash 2! The third broke hard right, desperate to escape, but Kara stayed glued. To him, her Raptor turning tighter than the books said was possible. Sweat poured into her mask, G-forces crushing her chest, but she held steady. Crosshairs lined up, the world narrowing to a single green dot. She fired again. Tracers stitched across the night sky, ripping into the fleeing jet. It erupted in a violent fireball, tumbling end over end into the dark. "Splash 3, she said, steady as stone. The comms went dead quiet. Not the silence of loss. This was different. Reverence. Cadets who had called her coward were hearing kill confirmations like drumbeats, each one shaking the foundations of their disbelief. One voice cracked through, almost disbelieving. She just dropped 3 of them in under a minute. Another whispered, "How is she doing that?" Colonel Vane's voice, tight and furious, cut across the net. "Steele, you are not cleared for this fight! Return to base immediately, that's an order." Kara ignored him. Her eyes locked on the swarm ahead, 12 enemy signatures converging. They weren't panicking, they were adjusting. The predators had just realized one of their prey was something far more dangerous. The enemy shifted into a wall formation, missiles streaking out in coordinated volleys. The sky lit up with tracer fire, glowing threads of death weaving across the darkness. Kara shoved her jet into a dive, the world ablur as she skimmed so low her jet carved through treetops. The missiles followed, engines howling behind her. She rolled hard, dragging them toward the ground, heart slamming against her ribs. At the last second, she pulled vertical, engines screaming, the Raptor clawing skyward. 2 missiles slammed into the trees, detonating harmlessly. A third streaked past her canopy, so close the explosion rattled her bones. Her breath came sharp, sweat stinging her eyes, but she didn't flinch. Her radar pinged 2 enemies breaking formation to pursue her. She gritted her teeth, rolled into them head-on. They fired first. She split as under the missile trails. The world flipping upside down, the horizon spinning until the sky became ground and ground became sky again. Her jet roared out of the maneuver behind them, her cannon spitting fire. One jet disintegrated instantly, the other broke off, smoking, vanishing into the haze. The cadets on the comms couldn't hold back now. "Did you see that?" She inverted under their fire. "No one flies like that!" Another, breathless, "She's pulling moves we weren't even taught were possible." Kara didn't answer them. She didn't need to. Every kill, every impossible maneuver was her answer. She wasn't flying for glory, wasn't flying for them. She was flying because silence was not an option while the sky burned. Her radar lit up again. 9 enemy fighters left, circling, wary now. They had come for an easy slaughter, a night of overwhelming dominance. Instead, 3 of their number burned in the dark, their wreckage lighting the clouds. And the woman they had thought grounded, erased, humiliated, was carving her legend into the sky 1 kill at a time. Down in the command center, officers and cadets pressed against radar screens, their eyes wide as 3 red blips winked out. The room was silent, mouths hanging open. One young cadet whispered to another, "They called her a coward. And she's saving us." But up in the cockpit, Kara Steele didn't hear them. She had no room for words. The night sky was her stage, the Raptor her instrument, and the song she played was one of fire and steel. The predators had thought they were hunters. Now, one by one, they were beginning to learn what it meant to be hunted. Kara Steele's breath rasped inside her mask as the radar screamed at her. 3 simultaneous locks. The cockpit glowed red, alarms shrieking, the Raptor vibrating under the strain of raw speed. 15 minutes into the fight, and she had already shredded 3 enemy. Jets sent a 4th limping away, but now the rest were adjusting. They weren't just predators anymore. They were a pack, circling with teeth bared. "3 on your 6!" a cadet shouted over the comms, panic splitting his voice. Kara didn't waste time answering. She knew. She could feel the lock even before the warning tone. Her pulse slowed, not quickened, the calm before the storm. "Fox 3! Fox 3!" Enemy voices cut sharp through the ether. Missiles screamed toward her, exhaust tails glowing like falling stars. 3 separate tracks converging on her position. Kara yanked the stick back. the Raptor tilting vertical, engines roaring as she punched through the cloud deck. The G-force crushed her into the seat, vision narrowing to a tunnel, blood pulling at the edges of her sight. She gritted her teeth, forced air into her lungs. The missiles chased, climbing fast. Kara threw the jet sideways into a roll, firing flares. The sky exploded in blossoms of heat. 2 missiles diverted, detonating in brilliant orange flashes above her. The third kept coming, relentless. She didn't dive away, she climbed harder. The altimeter spun, the clouds shredded around her canopy. Enemy fighters pursued from below, afterburners blazing as they committed to the chase. Kara pulled the nose higher, higher still, until the Raptor clawed into a near stall. The engines howled in protest. Warnings blared. Any normal pilot would have leveled out, but Kara's eyes locked on the contrails behind her. The 3 pursuing jets didn't realize what she was doing until it was too late. She cut throttle, the Raptor bleeding speed violently. The missile overshot, streaking past her canopy and detonating in the empty sky above. The pursuing fighters were locked into their climb, engines blazing too hot, too close together, too aggressive. Kara slammed the stick forward, dropping into a controlled fall. The Raptor slid beneath them like a blade slipping past armor. The 3 enemy jets tried to brake, but momentum betrayed them. One clipped the wing of another. Both erupted in a fireball, debris scattering like meteors. The third swerved too late, caught in the blast radius. Its fuselage split apart, tumbling into the dark. 3 down! Kara barked, her voice sharp, steady. That's 6 gone! On the comms, cadets gasped. One stammered she baited them into each other. Another whispered, that's impossible. In the command bunker, officers leaned forward over radar screens, watching 3 red blips vanish at once. Someone muttered, almost reverent, she's rewriting doctrine up there. Colonel Marcus Vane stood rigid, knuckles white against the railing, jaw locked tight. His voice cracked through the comms, desperate to reassert control. Steele, disengage now. That is a direct order. But the silence on the channel wasn't obedience anymore. It was disbelief giving way to awe. The cadets who once laughed at Kara were holding their breath, eyes glued to the sky, as if watching a myth unfold in real time. Kara pulled out of the stall, engines roaring as she leveled. Her HUD painted the night with targets. 9 had entered the fight. 6 were gone. Only 5 remained, circling now with caution, their formation tighter, discipline restored. But the hesitation in their maneuvers told her the truth. Fear was spreading through their ranks. They had come for an easy slaughter. Instead, they were bleeding altitude, numbers, and confidence. Her breathing steadied. Sweat dripped down her temples, her gloves slick on the stick. She whispered, almost to herself, "You should have left me on the ground. You should have left me silent." The comms crackled. A young cadet's voice broke through, shaky but filled with something new. Hope. She's turning them back. Another added, "Firmer this time, Major Steele, we're with you." For the first time that night, the word coward was nowhere in their voices. Only belief. High above the battlefield, the last 5 enemy fighters tightened formation, their contrails crossing like knives against the stars. They were still deadly, still outnumbering her battered squadron, but the sky no longer belonged to them. It belonged to the woman they had once dragged from her own cockpit, the woman they had tried to erase. Kara angled the Raptor's nose toward the cluster, throttle surging, the HUD glowing with their signatures. Her voice cut across the net, calm, commanding, unbreakable. 5 left. Stay tight, follow my lead. And down below, in the command center where cadets, officers, and even Marcus Vane stood transfixed, the reality sank in. Kara Steele had already done what no one believed possible. She wasn't surviving this fight, she was dominating it. Kara Steele steadied her breathing as the Raptor sliced back into formation. The sky was no longer the chaotic blur it had been minutes ago. It was sharp, controlled, hers. 5 enemy jets still prowled ahead, their formation shifting with the discipline of wolves circling a lone intruder. But Kara was not alone anymore. 2 voices crackled through her comms. "Survivors? Major Steele forming on your wing," one said, his tone still shaky but alive. Another followed, "Copy that. I'm here. What's your lead?" Kara's lips tightened into the faintest shadow of a smile. They had mocked her, laughed when she was dragged away. Now, after watching her carve fire through the night, they clung to her, as though she were the only solid ground left in a collapsing world. She spoke with the precision of steel. "We fly low, tight, pick them off one by one, no strays." "Copy, Major." The enemy squadron angled down, afterburners flaring, diving toward them in a scythe formation. Kara didn't flinch. She dropped the Raptor low. Skimming so close to the treetops, the warning alarm screamed. Her wingmen followed, engines roaring, the canopy filled with streaks of tracer fire that laced the sky above. The first pass came fast. 2 enemies broke formation, diving after them. Kara jerked the stick left, pulling her jet into a hard roll that slotted her behind one of them. Her cannon barked fire, 20mm shells slicing the night. The enemy fighter shuddered, flames bursting from its engine, and it spiraled into the darkness. "Splash 7, Kara muttered. Her wingman, emboldened, cut across the other pursuer's tail. His missile locked, fired, detonated with a thunderous crack. "Splash 8!" he shouted, disbelief and pride lacing his voice. The comms lit up with cadets watching from the ground. "She's leading them. She's actually leading them." The control room held its breath, officers gripping railings as red blips vanished from radar. Even Colonel Vane's voice faltered, caught between rage and awe. But the fight wasn't done. 3 enemies remained, their formation broken but their intent sharper. They swept in from above, cannon fire streaking down in golden arcs. Kara's second wingman caught a burst across his fuselage, alarms shrieking. His voice cracked over comms. "I'm hit! I can't hold her!" His jet nosedived into the tree line, erupting in fire. "Stay tight," Kara ordered the lone survivor, her voice hard as steel. She pulled high, engines screaming, catching 2 of the enemies in her sights as they overcommitted in pursuit. She loosed a pair of missiles, heat seekers locking fast. Both found their marks. 2 jets disintegrated in twin blossoms of flame. 9 kills, only 1 left. But this last pilot didn't run. He broke away from the wreckage and circled back, alone against her, his movements sharp, disciplined, almost elegant. Kara's HUD painted him with a solid lock, but he slipped away before the tone confirmed. He was no ordinary opponent. This was their ace. The sky narrowed to 2 predators. Kara breathed deep, steadying herself. "Stay clear," she told her remaining wingman. "This one's mine." The duel began. The enemy cut across her nose in a high G turn, cannon fire slashing through the night. Kara rolled under it, engines howling, pulling into a vertical climb that sent blood rushing from her head. She countered with a split S, dropping behind him, but he reversed thrust, his jet sliding backward unnaturally, forcing her to overshoot. "Damn, he's good," her wingman muttered, watching helplessly. Kara gritted her teeth. She had studied maneuvers like this, but seeing them flown against her was something else entirely. The ace was patient, deliberate, waiting for her to make a mistake. They spiraled through the clouds, contrails weaving like dueling swords. Kara rolled left, then right, each time finding him on her tail, he fired a missile. She dumped flares, dove into the tree line, branches scraping her fuselage. The explosion thundered above her, showering sparks across her canopy. Her chest heaved, but her focus sharpened. She yanked the Raptor upward, afterburners blazing, dragging the fight vertical again. The ace followed, his jet a shadow in her mirrors. Think, Kara, make him chase what he can't kill. Her mind raced through every maneuver she had ever practiced, every lecture where Vane had spat about discipline and obedience. None of it mattered now, only instinct. She pitched the Raptor high, engines clawing against gravity, then cut throttle to near stall. The jet shuddered, alarms howling, but she held it steady. The ace, committed to his pursuit, roared past beneath her. At the exact moment his nose broke into her sights, Kara slammed throttle forward, the Raptor snapping back to life. Her cannon thundered, tracers tearing across the dark. The enemy jet exploded in a blossom of orange fire, fragments raining into the night. Her breath rasped hard into the mask. 10 kills. 15 had come. 5 still remained below, but their formation was broken, scattered by fear. One by one, with her wingman at her side, Kara hunted them down. Another missile strike, another cannon burst. Fire bloomed across the horizon until only silence filled the comms. The final red blip vanished from her radar. 15 enemy jets destroyed. In the command bunker, cadets and officers stared in stunned silence at the screens. A whisper broke it. She did it. Another, louder, she shot down 15. Even Colonel Vane's voice had nothing left. His mouth opened, closed, but no words came. For the first time, the man who had called her coward stood silent, swallowed by the truth. Kara steadied her breathing, eyes on the horizon where the smoke curled into the stars. She spoke calmly, as though the sky weren't still glowing with the wreckage of a destroyed squadron. "This is Steele. Sector is clear." The silence that followed was different now. It wasn't disbelief. It was reverence. The night sky went quiet. No more missile trails, no more screaming engines, no more desperate voices cut short by static. Only the low, steady hum of Kara Steele's Raptor as it circled above the battlefield, her canopy reflecting the glow of burning wreckage below. 15 enemy fighters had entered the fight. 15 were gone. The silence left in their wake was heavier than thunder. Down at the base, the control room was frozen. Radar screens, once littered with hostile signatures, now showed only her green blip gliding steady across the grid. Officers leaned forward, mouths open, eyes wide. Cadets who had laughed at her that morning stood pale, transfixed, as the reality sank in. She had done what no doctrine, no squadron, no war manual had ever dared. To imagine one woman, alone, had erased an entire enemy strike wing. The comms crackled with hesitant breaths. Then the first voice broke through. A cadet, raw and shaking. She did it. She actually did it. Another followed, louder, carried by disbelief turned to awe. 15! She shot down 15! The words spread like sparks catching dry grass. In the trenches, in the hangars, across the entire base, voices rose in a single chant. Steele! 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 Kara heard them distantly, muffled beneath the hiss of her oxygen mask. But she didn't smile. Her chest heaved, her body burned with exhaustion, but her eyes stayed forward, steady. She wasn't flying for chance. She wasn't flying for their redemption of her name. She was flying because it had to be done. In the command bunker, Colonel Marcus Vane gripped the railing so tightly his knuckles turned white. His jaw clenched, his chest rising and falling as he searched for words, for commands, for anything that could reassert control. But there was nothing. His voice, once iron, had been stolen by the very pilot he had tried to bury. Around him, cadets and officers no longer looked to him. Their eyes were on the screens, on the burning sky, on the legend being written in real time. One of his aides whispered, almost reverently, "Sir, she just saved the base." Vane's mouth opened, then closed. Nothing came out. He could only watch as the balance of power shifted, not through rank or regulation, but through undeniable truth carved in fire and steel. High above, Kara's voice cut through the comms, low, calm, unyielding. "This is Major Steele. Hostiles neutralized. The sky is ours." The roar that followed shook the walls. Cadets cheered until their throats were raw. Mechanics dropped their tools to join in. Infantry pounded their fists against their rifles. For the first time that night, the base wasn't drowning in fear. It was alive with belief. Belief in the woman they had mocked, stripped, and dragged in disgrace. And Colonel Marcus Vane, the man who had called her a coward, stood mute in the middle of it all, his authority crumbling under the silence of his own defeat. Morning broke heavy with the smell of burnt fuel and scorched metal. Smoke still clung to the horizon like a scar, the sky stained with the memory of fire. Kara Steele walked with measured steps between two guards toward the Tribunal hall, though neither dared to touch her. Her flight suit was streaked with soot, her gloves torn, her face pale but unshaken. She carried no medals, no honors, only the silence of a woman who had flown into hell and returned. The steel doors groaned open. Inside, the hall was crowded. Cadets in wrinkled uniforms, mechanics with oil-stained hands, medics bandaged and weary from the night's carnage. Even wounded pilots had dragged themselves in, leaning on crutches or comrades, refusing to miss this moment. At the center sat Colonel Marcus Vane, his uniform immaculate, his posture rigid as iron, but his eyes betrayed a man hollowed by the weight of what he had witnessed. Kara was ordered to sit at a single table beneath the harsh light. The murmurs stilled as Vane's voice filled the hall, cold, precise, each word sharpened to wound. "Major Steele, you disobeyed direct orders, you broke confinement, you stole military property, and you endangered this entire base with reckless disregard for protocol. Do you deny any of it?" The silence pressed in. Kara let it linger, her gaze sweeping across the faces of cadets who had laughed at her, mechanics who had smirked, officers who had doubted. She spoke at last, her voice steady, carrying to every corner. "I deny nothing. I disobeyed. I stole. I broke every rule you placed in front of me, and because of it, this base still stands." A ripple passed through the crowd, gasps, whispers, shifting boots. Vane's jaw clenched, his knuckles drumming against the table. "You dare to justify insubordination with arrogance?" Kara leaned forward, her eyes locked on his. "I justify it with victory. You grounded me for being reckless, but your discipline failed, your protocols shattered, and if not for what you called recklessness, every person in this room would be ash." The silence that followed was suffocating, but it was no longer filled with scorn. It was reverence. A senior commander cleared his throat, his voice gravelly with disbelief. "The records confirm it. 15 enemy fighters downed, an entire strike wing erased. Such results have never been recorded, not by a squadron, not by a wing. Alone." He leaned back, eyes narrowing. "Impossible." Kara's answer was quiet but carved in steel. "Impossible is why I did it." The hall shifted again. Cadets stared at her with awe, mechanics with regret, wounded pilots with pride. the weight of authority tilted, no longer in Vane's hands, but in hers. He slammed his palms on the table, his voice cracking. "Enough! This is not how the military survives. We live by discipline, not lone heroes. She is a danger, not an example." But the room had already chosen. The senior commander's tone was final. "Major Steele will not be dismissed. She will be commended for extraordinary valor." Vane froze, the air drained from his lungs. He wanted to fight, but the silence of the room was louder than his fury. He sat down slowly, the iron in his spine melted by the truth. The guards opened the doors. Kara stood, her boots echoing across the hall. She slipped the torn insignia into her pocket and walked forward, her chin high, her gaze unshaken. Outside, the base was assembled. From the tribunal steps to the hangars, 2 long lines stretched unbroken. Cadets, mechanics, medics, soldiers. Even the wounded stood straight, leaning on crutches, their salutes trembling but unwavering. Helmets tucked beneath arms, eyes locked forward. A corridor of honor carved from those who had once scorned her. Kara stepped onto the concrete, the same flight line where she had been dragged in shame. Not a word was spoken. Not a whisper broke the silence. The salutes rose one by one, spreading down the corridor like a wave. Grease-stained fingers snapped to attention. Trembling cadet hands lifted high. Medics smeared with blood stood unflinching. At the far end, Colonel Vane stood stiff, his face pale. Slowly, unwillingly, his hand rose to his brow. The salute was not for him to give, but for the truth he could no longer bury. Kara walked through the corridor, each step slow, deliberate. They no longer saw the coward. They saw the legend who had turned the sky into fire and rewritten the fate of a war. She reached the end where her scarred F-22 rested, its fuselage blackened, its paint scorched. She placed her hand on its battered side, turned back toward the silent corridor, and lifted her chin. The silence held, deeper than any cheer, heavier than any anthem. It was the silence of reverence, and in that silence, Kara Steele walked not as the woman they had dragged from the cockpit, but as the pilot who could never be erased. She had been dragged from her cockpit in humiliation, stripped of honor, silenced before the very eyes that now stood in awe. And yet, when the sky demanded the impossible, Kara Steele answered with fire. 15 enemy jets fell from the heavens, not by squadrons or doctrine, but by the will of one woman who refused to bow. Her story is not about disobedience, it's about courage. Courage to rise when the world calls you worthless. Courage to fly when others want you grounded. Courage to prove that silence is never an option when lives are at stake. Thank you for staying with us through this journey. This has been a simple woman, where legends born in defiance are remembered in fire. If Kara's story moved you, subscribe to the channel, share this story, and ring the bell so you never miss what comes next. And we'd love to hear from you. What moment struck you the hardest? Was it when she was dragged from her jet in disgrace, or when she returned to rewrite the skies? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. We'll be reading every one, and don't go anywhere. The screen in front of you now holds more untold stories of courage and defiance. Choose the next story, and keep walking with us into the silence that only legends can fill.